It's a pleasure to welcome Phyllis Wise here this morning. Phyllis and I came to the University of Washington about the same time in 2005, the fall of 2005. She serves as provost, which is the chief academic officer of the university. She serves as executive vice president and assistant to the president. She is an educator. She has her PhD in zoology from the University of Michigan. She is a visionary. She sees the world as a global environment and is moving us as a university in that direction. She's also an excellent administrator. She has restructured several offices on campus. It's a pleasure to welcome you, Phyllis, here this morning. Thank you.
Well, I will make my comments really short so that you can get on to the important business that you have before you. It's a real privilege, and thank you, Bob and Dick, for inviting me to open this third meeting of the SIS. It is an incredible thing that you are doing, that you are working on. The University of Washington is known for innovation. It's almost in our DNA. It's so routine. But the reason why we are able to do this is because we've been able to partner with businesses like Boeing, who before anyone else understood that you can't stand still, that you have to partner, that teamwork across disciplines, business, industries, NGOs, the university, are the best kinds of teams to innovate, to think about tomorrow, to think about a decade from now, to think about a century from now before anybody else really even thinks about it. So this conference is a way to be able to bring people together for a relatively short amount of time, to be able to work together in ways that most other universities do not embrace, and most other industries do not understand or appreciate either. So the work that Dick and Bob have done to organize this meeting, your participation for us to all be able to benefit in ways that we could never do working alone is really pretty amazing. So I'm so pleased that you'll spend this time really working with each other, picking each other's brains so that you really, really get the best of all of this. So I just want to thank you for letting me come and open this meeting. I wish I could stay for the whole day, but as Bob described, I am the Chief Academic and Budgetary Officer, and there are a few pressing things going on right now. But I do wish I could stay here, because I'm sure I would learn a lot more here than I will during the day that I have planned for myself. So thanks, Bob. Thanks, Dick.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. I'm going to address a question this morning that's going to be dealt with during the day, probably during both days. And I have to credit Mike Eisenberg with starting this whole thread. Mike said to me about a year ago, a little more, he said, kids don't use email anymore. And I thought, how can this possibly be? I can't live without email, and I don't know how the younger people could either. Started investigating it. Corrine and I looked into what the digital natives, or millennials as they're being called, are they different? Do they behave differently? Well, I think the answer to that is yes. What I want to do in the next few minutes is talk about what we think we know, what we don't yet know, and there's a lot of that, and why it may matter. Let me give you the short answers in case you have to rush out. Are they wired different? Yes. We all are, as it turns out. We all have different brain wirings, so that's kind of a trivial answer. What do we think we know? We think we know a lot based on recent brain plasticity studies. A lot of research has been going on. We don't know a lot of the science behind it. We don't know what's actually going on in the brain. And why does it matter? Well, we think, Corrine and I came away convinced that there were many, many things we should be paying attention to in this, including education, which you got a glimpse of. Now, why we think it matters is there's a big group of people coming in here. If you look at the baby boomers, they were the big ones, the big group of people, 82 million. The baby boomers, a big group. The Generation X, not quite nearly as large, but then we've got this millennials, the digital natives coming in, and the idea, people sociologists are noticing that these baby boomers are retiring about the same time the millennials are entering the workplace. Now that is just maybe happenstance. I want you to meet Ryan and Samantha. Now, they happen to be my grandchildren. They are brilliant. Now, most grandchildren are, you might say. They are baby Einsteins. They actually are, and this has been shown, because they're not much different than every other child and infant. A lot of research here at the university iLabs have shown what's been going on. Each of us is born with about 100 billion neurons. But there's only about 50 trillion synapses or pathways that are connecting those neurons at the time of birth. And by age 3, Samantha is 2.5 now, by age 3 she will have developed 1 quadrillion learning pathways. That's going to stay about the same for the next 4, 5, 6 years. And then as she approaches 10, as all children approach 10, they start pruning. They become more efficient. Those unused pathways are just dropped, but the used pathways are reinforced. Now, what this says to me and to many of us is that the early culture is shaping what they pay attention to. It shapes how they organize experiences, their knowledge, how concepts are expressed, how they communicate. And Hall, this was almost 20 years ago now, says once people have learned to learn in a given way, it's very difficult to learn another way. Culture shapes the way one learns. But Prensky has estimated that if digital natives, the people born in that age group, go to college, they will have spent, these digital natives, 10,000 hours playing video games. They will have sent and received over 200,000 text messages, IM messages. You saw the statistics earlier. They will have spent 10,000 hours on mobile phones or whatever the technology is that's emerging. And they will have watched 20,000 hours of TV. They've been immersed in this incredible, intense information environment. Now, what we know about the brain studies has been inferred from behavioral observations. We can't get into the brain as well as we'd like. There's, in the past, and until just recently, we've got functional magnetic resonance imaging, which looks at blood flow. Every time the neuron fires, it needs more blood, it needs energy. And so they've measured this with this fMRI. But that response time is in the order of seconds, so you can't get really real time. And you get the spatial resolution in the brain of about 2 to 3 millimeters. What we've got now, and we've just got authorization to get one here on the campus, I've learned, magnetoencephalography, MEG. It actually looks at the neuron firings. It's on the order of milliseconds, about 1 millisecond, and about 1 millimeter. So you're getting much higher resolution. What this means is, in the next few years, we will be able to look and see what is going on when someone is playing a game and doing other things. We may be able to detect whether people are really multitasking or not, because different parts of the brain are excited by different tasks. So we're not there yet. Many inferential studies. The impact of video games on training surgeons. Now, this is scary a little bit. You know, brain surgeons. They're better if they play a lot of video games. It's a little disturbing, but it's been shown. Now, the study that Corinne and I did concluded this. There were several areas where the boomers and the digital natives simply have different values or different attitudes or different work styles. They just differ behaviorally. Time management. Baby boomers think in terms of time management. Efficiency. Digital natives do a lot of things at once. Learning style, that's all over the map, but primarily learning from programmed instruction. The big thing was programmed instructions. Digital natives prefer to learn from experience. Collaboration, some of us grew up independent. If we can't do it ourselves, maybe we're in the wrong job. Maybe we need to learn something else. A lot more collaboration with digital natives. You can read these. Different values, different approaches. Let me just go through a couple of them. Time value, time management versus multitasking. Do you do things one at a time, or do you just do it all at once? Now, there's some cultural differences here. Most studies say that it's just impossible to pay attention to more than one thing at once. And that's from the brain studies we have right now. I don't know that those are high enough resolution. But a manager at Microsoft, one of our current PhD students, says, my most productive coder, when he said this, he was working for him, my most productive coder watches movies while he works. And he's the most productive. Some other studies show that if you're listening to music, it depends on the music, but you can be more productive. The lower score here is more efficient, a better score. And you've got both timed and untimed, but it was one of these ranking tests, and the lower the score is, the better the score. It's kind of like golf. And if you're listening, the dyads that listen to classical music, I think it was Mozart, did much better, significantly better. Now, you can argue, is that just background? Is it doing something to the brain to kind of get it in sync, prepare it, or is it multitasking? We don't know. A colleague said to me one time that she had a young professional, she was working with a young professional, who had told her organization, if I can't spend a third of my time making sure that I get information to NGOs, organizations that need the information free, then I'm just going to leave. So they assigned her to this project to make information available. I'm going to leave you with one point here. I've got a few more slides, but this is kind of the point. I think we need to manage paradoxes. I said this earlier in something that, in a response to Rob. I think we, the older generation, as it were, need to manage paradoxes because digital natives seem to be doing it pretty well. Independent and collaborative. The massively multiplayer online role-playing games, World of Warcraft, that requires cooperation, but it's competitive. It's both and. It's not either or. Social networking sites. I was talking with Monica last night. You know, it's not private. It's not public. It's something in between. It's both private and public. It's a paradox. One of the explanations possibly about multitasking, it could be that this generation is learning to time slice things much more quickly. Just to pay attention to something very quickly, then move on. Make a decision, move on. I tend to think that that's happening. I think I can see that in some of my colleagues who spend less and less time on things that I would kind of mull over, think about. They say, no, it's not important. It's not important right now. Let's move on. So they make rapid decisions, make rapid judgments how relevant it is. The blurring of professional and private lives. We see that in Facebook. We see it in mobile communication. I've got some slides of the Google Zurich office I'd like to show you. This was one of the things that in our study we didn't make a big issue of, but the response we got from CIOs was, you should pay attention to this. It's happening. The difference between private life, professional life is not moving. And finally, let me just mention, and Mike Eisenberg would appreciate this, virtual is becoming reality. This diagram is kind of an interesting way of displaying things. This is time going from here, from the center, outward. So you've got 2003 out to 2008. On the radial, the circumference, you have the initiation of new accounts in virtual worlds. The size is approximate for the number of new registered accounts. But look at the age group. Look at the growth here between 10 and 20. This is where the even younger generation is putting time. They're registering on virtual worlds. And just for reference, Second Life is here. It's for the above 30. It was started in about 2003. So let me just show you something. Many of you may know that we are spending time thinking about moving the information school. We are going to be moving the information school to the Lewis building to the Lewis Hall here on campus. And we're thinking how we have a chance to redesign it, to design it like we want to work. Now, I'm not sure that that we're ever going to get this far, but I do want to show what some people are thinking about, have thought about in other places. Google Zurich. We put this out as something to promote us. Hey, that looks nice. If you look closely, though, those are books painted on the wall, and the bookshelves are not full. But it does look nice and relaxed, a place for thinking, contemplation. But then you get a Fabergé egg that you can close yourself into. This is their office, remember. It looks more like a rec room, a place for private study. And then, of course, it is Switzerland. So I don't know whether this is an office or a meeting room, conference room. But there are several of them in that, or igloos. And this, again, I saw this several times before I realized this guy is in a bathtub. I don't know that it has water in it, but that may be where he relaxes and learns most. A lot of whimsy. The walls you write on. Now we are thinking that. I think we may get that in our new offices. Different motifs. Getting from, at least from the higher floors down, it's, and then again, I don't know anybody that plays the air guitar, but there is this game, I'm told by my son, that you actually can jam with others, and it's, again, this doesn't look like your usual office. This is what I want, massage tables. I want this in our new Lewis Hall. Again, I don't know whether these are offices, Peter may tell us later, whether they're offices or just meeting rooms. Again, cafeteria. Again, the vertical movement is not what you'd usually think of as elevators. Now, we can stop dreaming and face reality. I'm not sure that this is reality for most of us, but it does say that we can start thinking differently. I think we are thinking differently. I think the digital natives, the millennials, are thinking differently. The next thing we'll do is have a panel of people who will be responding. Let me introduce the panel and turn it over to Mike Eisenberg. I will introduce the people, and if you will come down and take seats here, in no particular order, but Shannon Swift. Shannon Swift is CEO of Swift HR Solutions. She works with a lot of startups, including startups that are serving digital natives. Monica Guzman. Monica is an online reporter for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. I first became aware of her when she was doing a written column, one of those old-fashioned things, called Net Native, because she is a net native. She is in that age group. Karine Barzilai-Nahan. Karine is a colleague, assistant professor at the Information School, also the director of the Center for Information and Society and the co-author of the paper that we just talked about. Peter Wilson. Peter Wilson is director of engineering at Google. He also serves as site manager for the new location at Kirkland. They will be designing new buildings shortly. Quentin Christensen. Where's Quentin? Quentin is just graduating from our informatics program. He was the undergraduate association president. He's the information systems manager for Powell Christensen Inc., and he's just taken a job at Microsoft, if I'm correct. Is that right? And Philip Thurtle. Philip is associate professor of history. He's been writing interesting things about genetics and how genetics are changing and how we may look to genetics as our model. And finally, but certainly not least, our founding, I will say, our iSchool founder, who started the whole iSchool movement in one sense, but our Dean Emeritus, Mike Eisenberg, Mike, if you can get him off without talking about Second Life, you will have done something that I haven't been able to do. But Mike, when we say Dean Emeritus, it's really kind of misleading because Mike is more active, if that's possible, than he has ever been. Mike, it's all yours.
I'd like each person to make an initial opening statement about what's your take on digital natives. Are they recognizable? Are they really any different? There were some assumptions built into this that there are digital natives and others and whatever. And so I thought we would just start by giving each person a couple or 3 minutes, or if you want to take a little longer, as if you were twittering about digital natives. So do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. When I first read the reports on digital natives, I actually was struck by two things struck me. The first one was the notion of incrementability between the generations. For instance, are there so many differences between the natives versus the immigrants? For me as a historian, that's very important because what happens if you don't notice the incrementability is that you tend to then privilege the technologies instead of the social sites of where the technologies are innovated from. And for me, that's very important. So I want to look at the outliers often in the different types of generations, because for me, that's where a lot of the innovations come from. And the second, and this kind of ties into the second point, which I thought was very fascinating, is that because of the way that you're looking at digital natives in the report, I thought that was just a great way of thinking about how to harness difference for innovation and for education.
I mean, you say there is an identifiable, recognizable group that might be labeled digital natives.
Yes, I can actually see it in my classrooms. It's the difference of it is profound, and it seems to be changing every year.
So I've spent quite a bit of my time over the past few years dealing with communication issues, organizing and working with teams, and doing organizational changes, both as a college student, as a student leader, and within my family's business, and as we've acquired different businesses and trying to deal with different issues that we have with communication and using communication to spread information in different ways, such as using instant messaging, using email, using telephone, with older generations of people who didn't even know how to use a computer a few years ago, with this younger generation. So kind of one of the interesting things when we purchased the auto dealership last year, the general manager for the store who we partnered with, he had owned the store before and we bought into it. He had never used a computer for any of his work before, and he had his daughter working as a secretary, and she got the whole business using Google Talk or whatever their instant messaging application is, and he was on that and using it, and it got him using a computer. So I've looked at some of these different, how this affects communication in the organization.
In terms of the digital native thing, my take is it's not so much a generational thing, it's about access to technology. The technology has enabled us to be more firstly be more productive, and secondly to communicate in new and interesting ways. So I see this in terms of my relationship with my parents. It's well documented, there's an upwards generational impact, that my parents use IM because I do, and not the other way. And I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm really excited what she's going to teach me to use next.
The sky's the limit.
Yeah, really. So it's clearly very real. I'm not sure that it's a generational cutoff so much as an exposure to technology, exposure to new ways of interaction cutoff.
Corrine.
Okay, a comment. When Bob first came to me and said, let's learn the digital native, I was very skeptical, to be honest, because I'm dealing with information politics. That's what interests me in terms of
Information politics.
Yes, and anybody that talks about information politics knows that when we tend to analyze things, we talk about individuals, and we don't like to cluster groups in certain kind of they are doing those, and I'm still I know that there is a kind of group clusters, and if you read the paper, you'll see we are kind of provocative, kind of saying, these are the lines, the black and white thing of, and I am aware that it's not always that. So you have a lot of individual characteristics when you come to think about digital natives. So and also about us, right? Geeks like us, or the iSchoolers, for instance, are are like much different, like for instance, than I would say people who work in other kinds of industries maybe.
But Monica, what's your take on the digital native? Are you writing for the digital native, or are you writing about the digital native, or both?
In part, but the audience is bigger than that. But yeah, I do think that there are digital natives, but as fellow panelists here have said, it's not just a generational thing. You know, I have seen it in other age groups. But I think what the main distinction is between digital natives and maybe everybody else isn't so much an access to technology, but this comfort with being open and with sharing themselves, which technology has facilitated. And I think that that's come because the technology came around when they were in high school, when I was in college. And those are the times when you face a lot of social pressure. And so Facebook went from being the thing that only the creepy people did to being the thing that you had to do, and the creepy people were the ones that weren't on Facebook. And at least in my college, it's like, why, really? Okay, you're weird. So it became a kind of a, you know, you had to get used to technology. You had to be okay with it. And so now we're kind of going into the working world expecting some of the same things, and facing a very individual, independent, hierarchical structure that is a little strange. So I do think that that's true.
So I am in human resources, and I'm actually, just to go back a little bit further, I'm a cusp baby. So on some studies I'm a boomer, the last boomer. I was born in '65, and in others I'm the first year of the Gen X. And so when I got into the workplace, there were lots of generational issues then. And I remember dealing with 60-year-old employees that had kind of behaviors that weren't considered to be appropriate from a human resources standpoint. And so so I've always been fascinated with just the different generations in the workplace, and I think particularly over the last 5 years. So I've been in HR for 22 years, but over the last 5 years, the digital natives has really, or the millennials has really become to emerge for me within my client group. So we work. My company is Swift HR Solutions. We work with a variety of early stage companies, and come in as the head of HR, and so we might be working with 4 or 5 different companies, and so watching the changes in the demographics of our client groups. And one of the biggest challenges that we see is really older managers trying to understand what's happening with the workforce. Why are they coming in at 9 and leaving at 4, and they're always on they're on these social sites, they're not working, and yet they're being very productive. And so trying to get the focus off of the time and the hierarchy. They're not as what we see, and again speaking in generalities, which I don't like to do, but we do see kind of a trend of not upward career movement, and so there's not a big focus on climbing the career ladder. They're more interested in, what am I working on today? Where am I working? What's my office space like? Who am I working with? And knowing that 3 years from now I'm probably going to be someplace else doing something completely different.